Welcome to A&N In Depth, the podcast dedicated to those that want to know how the Seventh-day Adventist Church works, what we believe, and how you can join it. Today, we have Pavel Goia with us, representing the Ministerial Department. Is it a department, Pavel? What is
it? It's association.
It's an association. That's what
Correct.
I thought. So it's not a department, it's an association.
Correct.
And Elder Ramon Canals, he is the secretary.
He is the Ministerial Secretary.
Ministerial Secretary. Why don't you call it a director?
Because normally the Ministerial Director, as our church is organized, should be the president of the General Conference of the Worldwide Church.
I see. So he is the secretary responsible for the pastors. We have about 21,000 pastors around the world, which is a lot of pastors. The average is one pastor to 11 congregations or 12, something like that. And there are many others that are Bible workers and so on. So up to 30,000 that are responsible for the care of souls, let's say, in the Adventist Church globally. And ministerial works directly with them.
Yes.
What is the role of a ministerial secretary in a local conference or in a region of the world?
As we said, again, I'm going to repeat what you said. Elder Wilson is the Ministerial Director. Elder Canal is the Ministerial Secretary. And under the General Conference, at least, we have a few associate directors or secretaries. I am one of them. And we are divided per responsibilities. Basically, one of us, Elder Robert Costa, is responsible with evangelism. And then I could go through all the names. Each one has a different responsibility. And in a way that we should cover all the needs of the pastors so they could function, they could have the resources, they could have the support they need. So the churches in different areas of the world can grow and fulfill the mission.
So here we have publications that we send all around the world and so on. But I'm asking about the local field where the pastors are. They have a ministerial secretary in their own conference.
Correct.
So generally a conference has between 50 and 100 churches, sometimes more. And in that particular conference, generally around 30, 40, 50, sometimes 80 pastors in a single conference. And the ministerial secretary there provides them with what? Support and guidance, or what do they do?
The Ministerial Secretary, the reason it's called an association, not a department, is because instead of being coordinated by the conference or union or division, is actually representing the pastor to the conference. The Ministerial Association is supposed to represent the pastor and the pastor's needs related to both ministry in the local district and the needs specific of the pastor himself or herself, the pastor. And so in this way, it's an association because it represents the pastor to the conference. Now, as you know, you said that the conference has 30 pastors to 80 pastors. Sometimes some of them, as far as I know, have as low as 15 pastors, and some of them as high as 400 pastors. And I know specific.
Right. So it's 15 to 400.
Could be, depends on the size of the conference, the location of the conference.
Yes.
And then you think about that. A pastor can have down to one church, if it's bigger, or up to, I've seen pastors that had 90 churches. And so how could a pastor fulfill the mission unless the pastor has training, support, resources, and so on, in order so they could do a good job and they could feel that they are not alone in the district. So that's the reason of the conference should have a ministerial and should help the pastor keep in close contact with the pastor.
Ministerials then become or are advocates of the pastors within the day-to-day operation of the conference.
They are and they should.
The local church, the local conference president is the administrator, but the ministerial is the advocate of the pastors, presenting and defending their interests, their needs of training, their support, and whatever else is needed so the workforce, the pastoral workforce, can continue their work of evangelism and nurture.
Correct. And now when we say defending, yes, we can say that, but in the same time, we need to keep in mind that the ministerial And the rest of the conference should work really close in unity together, because we all should defend what is best within our rules, within our doctrines, and so on, what is best for the church to grow. And so we should always aim for a good relationship between ministerial and the rest of the administration in the conference.
We have pastors all over the world working in the most varied and diverse environments. We have pastors that are pastoring churches that are in the middle of nowhere, sometimes in the middle of the ice. Other pastors in the middle of the jungle. They have to go by boat for days to find their remotest churches. And then you have pastors that are in densely populated areas where there are 8 pastors for a single church. So there is a tremendous diversity in ministry. I would like to talk about the publications that the General Conference Ministerial Association publishes and the projects that you work with. Let's start with Ministry Magazine.
Yes. So if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about publications, but another 1 or 2 aspects that are very much connected to what you mentioned. And so starting with the publications, we need to keep in mind that there are not too many resources that are for pastors. The church has a lot of resources, but for pastors specifically is Ministry Magazine alone. When you talk about, not that they absolutely can use any publication or most publications, but Ministry Magazine is designed specifically for pastors at the recommendation of Ellen G. White, and it was started by Daniels in 1928. Now, Ministry Magazine goes to, as far as we know, around 22,000, and it was added Swahili, so right now it goes to a lot more pastors, and we intend to add Hindi and 2 dialects from India to increase the number. And so it goes to most pastors, Seventh-day Adventist pastors, and also to around 50 or more, 56,000 more or less non-Adventist pastors. Before I continue, I cannot help myself but to praising God, to underline a little that we get a lot, and I mean a lot of letters from Adventist and non-Adventist pastors that really appreciate the magazine. In fact, some of them ask for more. Some denominations ask for magazine to be supplied also to their seminary students, different denominations. And we got rewards from Associated Church Press systematically for the last 4 or 5 years. Every year, 3-4 awards. The best in content, best in design, a lot of awards as high quality magazine. And this is what I said, I cannot help myself. I got to underline these things. We have added audio so they can drive and listen. We have added...
For every article, you can just go to the website, Ministry.
100% for the entire magazine. They can listen while they drive instead of reading. And we have added digital. Let's suppose a conference. We got phone calls from different conferences that we ship it to the conference, but then they have to ship it somewhere far away. And shipping is very expensive. So they said, can you send us digital so we save some money with shipping? We don't have the money. We have digital and it's cheaper. And they have access to digital or print or both. Plus, we have added integrated research. That means that if they go on our page, they can put any subject they wish, any absolutely subject, and it's going to give them anything that was written in ministry since 1928 to date related to that subject. Basically, it helps a lot with the pastor's research and study. And I could go in more.
So if they meet if they are in a visit or they have a family struggling with teenage depression, let's say, they can go to Ministry Magazine and search for those key terms and then read some articles written for pastors like them. And then he or she can read it and figure out how they can help that family.
And we have this situation. People call us, do you have any articles on 3 angels message? We got phone call on demon possession, how to deal with it. And we said, just type the words. And they called us back and they said, it's amazing. And I want to mention, and I will not mention more because we want to praise God and we want to move to your questions, but I want to mention that we have aimed for the best authors, for the best quality of content articles in a way that is not boring. They are good articles. And we did research, we did survey with the pastors. We did it only in the North American division. And we are extremely impressed because while other publications have sometimes, and I don't want to refer to anyone specific, but a low percentage of being read, we have about 34, 37, sometimes 40%. And they say they don't read the whole magazine. They choose the subject that they need, that they are dealing with. And so very high percentage of pastors who actually read it. And so we praise God for that.
Indeed we do.
Now
if there are other pastors that are listening to this who are not Adventist pastors, they can also have access to it.
Absolutely.
But the question that I'm sure people have is, how much does it cost to have access to it?
Very good question. For the Seventh-day Adventist pastors, and the John Fieser, who is the financial manager, has the numbers and everything. You cannot know all these details. That's the reason we have people with communication, with finances, so on. But as far as I know, it's $30 per subscription per pastor that is Adventist. It's $25 if it's digital, and that's for a year. It's pretty good. And it is $0 for the non-Adventist pastors, no cost.
And how much is it to go to the website and search? Do you need to create an account? Do you need to pay the $25? How does that work?
They, as far as I know, and I need to ask my communication manager, if you have a subscription, you have access to all of them up to date. If you don't have a subscription, you have access after they are several months old.
I see. Okay. So you don't get the latest, but it goes back to 1929, so you get most of that period. I think it is a few months, yes. Okay, good. Then
the other publications,
to
go to your question.
I want to explore a little bit the publications for the pastoral spouses.
Exactly. We move there. So the pastoral spouses, we have Stronger Together. And that's very good quality. As far as I know, I could be wrong because I'm in ministry with Ministry Magazine, but it doesn't go monthly. It goes every 3 months, but it's high quality. It's a little bigger, more articles, and very strongly oriented for the spouses and the pastor family, the children and so on, for the whole family to provide support for the pastor family.
Excellent.
And
in a local church, the elders, we call them elders, and if people are not familiar with it, you mentioned, Elder Wilson, Elder Ramon Canals, and elder. So this is, I've seen it in a few countries, America is one of them, that you have, out of deference and respect for people at the General Conference, they're called elders. We refer to them as elder, this and that. But every local church has a group of elders that are part of the pastoral team responsible for the care of souls within that community. So visitation and prayer and the pastoral care, really. And they have a ministerial here at the General Conference has a publication for them, right? For these local church leaders. Tell me about that.
Yes. How would a pastor do quality job in a local church or district unless he has the support, the understanding, the same vision, the unity of the leaders of the church? So then we talk about elders and deacons. So when we talk about elders, they are the local leaders that know the church, that live there, that have been there. Pastors come and go, but elders are the people who live there. And so only as they work together, as they train, empower, enable, involve the local leaders, they can really get the whole church, because those leaders have influence over the church. They are elected by the church. And so Elders Digest refers specifically to the elders and the deacons, providing resources, support, information, training, and so on for them, so they know what to do and how to do it, and to help the pastor and to help the church. Now, when we talk about elders, we need to realize there are pastors who have 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 churches. How could they even go there unless they have the local elders actually do the job? And so it is absolutely vital to realize that without elders, the church would not be able to fulfill the mission and to take care of the local needs. And so it's very important to provide resources for them.
The general Protestant church manages everything locally. So the local church pastor is responsible for the resourcing of their members, for training the elders, for training the deacons, for training all of the different departments, the children's ministries and the family ministries, and etc. In the Adventist Church, there is an entire support structure, and this magazine for the elders is part of that support structure, where the pastor does not need to invest time and planning in resourcing his or her elders with theological training in that sense, because the magazine helps with that in thinking through some church activities and also the knowledge that the elder needs. So we have this incredible support system with publications and training and so on from the local conference, the union, the division, and in this case, the general conference that has these publications.
Mm-hmm. I want to add a few things that people don't know. Not only the ministry magazine, the Stronger Together for Spouses and Family, and Elders Digest, that is for elders and deacons, but we have book signs, or however you call them, in bookmarks. And we have cards that on the back of the card have a QR code. And we have many of them related to different subjects like revival, our church growth, training, and so on. And for all of them, for pastors, for spouses, for elders, for deacons, and as soon as they scan the code, it gives them access to the resources of the General Conference. So they can actually go into a specific thing like prayer or church growth or evangelism or whatever subject, and they can take that card, scan the code, and get into the revival page. And then they get resources that you will be impressed how many resources. Plus, let's talk about elders since we are there. The magazine that goes every 3 months also has sermons for them and sermons outlines and how to prepare a sermon. So when the pastor is not there, they get help. And so all these things, if people knew and used it, it would really help.
I'm sure it would. Okay, let's move on from the magazines and let's go back to the overall mission of ministry altogether.
Very much. I
tell
hope
me
you
about
mentioned that. Because that was when I said there are a few more things, not only the publications. So if we think about it, the church has a mission. The church is not just an institution, but has a mission, should be a movement. Jesus told us clearly as a command to reach the world with the good news of salvation, the gospel. And so the church has a mission. In order to fulfill that mission, when you think about all these areas, remote areas, as you mentioned, jungle, or urban areas, millions of people, very secular cities and so on, how do you reach them? And so in this context, it is extremely important that pastors, elders, churches get, number one, the vision, number two, the spiritual health and growth. How could they really fulfill the mission unless they themselves have a relationship with God that is strong? And then they have the information, then they have the training. And so, talking about the mission, I want to emphasize in a very strong way, there is no church in the Adventist Church worldwide that can be healthy without being involved. And that's the reason Ministerial is doing training to help the pastors know how to train the members. So every member works. We will never be able, at the rhythm that the church, the world is growing, we will never be able to reach the world with the good news unless we go in God's power. That's number one. We mentioned in the Bible about the promise of the latter rain. Mm-hmm. And we talked about the early rain from Hosea and so on. And we believe that the first century church, the disciples, when they received the Holy Spirit, they were enabled through the power of the Spirit to reach the world, to start the work. And we need the power of God, the power of the Spirit, right now to reach the world, to finish the work. Otherwise, how could we reach everybody? So that's number one, the power of God. But number two, you got to train every member so they can reach their neighbors, their relatives, their friends, their co-workers, their colleagues. So every member to use the gifts they have in the area they are. So the whole church functions, the whole church is healthy. Then the church would grow. It's not only the pastors and the elders that should work.
The word pastor comes from the Latin pastoralis, which means to shepherd. And what you're referring to in the involvement of the members is in evangelism and so on, and nurture and pastoral care as well, but especially in evangelism, it is sheep that make sheep, not shepherds. So it's sheep that make sheep, not shepherds. The pastors must involve their members in the work of mission, because if it was up to the pastors only, we would never finish this.
And the pastoral responsibility is extremely high, because I'm trying to put it in a positive way, but you look in Israel history, a good leader and you have the whole nation go up and be blessed and grow, and a bad leader and you have the whole nation eventually go down and go in slavery and so on. So leaders are extremely important. The pastor is the shepherd, and the pastors are supposed to have a strong relationship with God, to be spiritual people, and to love the flock, let's call it that way, the members, the sheep, as you said, and to nurture them and to train them and to prepare them. The pastor should do a quality job taking care of the church, not only taking care of their needs, but training them, preparing them, encouraging them, involving them. And as you have a good leader preparing the church, then the church has good experience, good results in working, so they get encouraged. And as they see how God is blessing, they get momentum and more people want to join. And so good leader, good church, you have a growing church.
Everything rises and falls on leadership. Pastor Pavel Goia, thank you for joining us at A&N In Depth.
My privilege.
And thank you for listening to this. If you are watching it on YouTube, you can go ahead and ask a question. We'll send it to Pastor Pavel Goia, and maybe he will even answer you there. Otherwise, our team will answer you. So feel free to write that on YouTube. If you're listening on any other platform, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and come back next week, and we will have Pastor Pavel Goia again, and we'll be talking about theology. Why is that so interesting? What is the role of the pastors in the theological health and sound doctrine of their local churches? That's what we'll be talking about next week. I hope to see you then.